Today on CityCast Denver, we're here with another summer reading recommendation. This new book is part memoir, part true crime, and it exposes a landmark sexual assault investigation that rocked the local college football community almost 20 years ago. It's about the young women who came forward with allegations against the CU Boulder football team, and a university culture that prioritized a winning season above all else.
Before this case, there wasn't really the understanding that a school's responsible for what their team does. It was like, well, those are individual criminals. Those are individual people who committed those crimes. And are they really crimes?
Erica Krause is the author of Tell Me Everything, the story of a private investigation. She sat down with our own Peyton Garcia for a conversation that first aired in March of this year. And just a note, while there are no graphic descriptions, this episode does contain discussions about sexual assault. Today is Tuesday, July 12th. I'm Lizzie Goldsmith, in for Bree Davies, and this is CityCast Denver.
Erica Krause, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thank you so much for having me here, Peyton.
So when most people hear about Tell Me Everything, I think they're going to hear that it's about the CU Boulder football team's sexual assault scandal of the early 2000s. But you never actually name the university you're talking about or the city that you're talking about in your book. Can you explain that choice to me?
Sure. So I would love to, because I'm just a really whistleblower type of person. But I'd love to talk about who and when and all the bad guys, and all the people who did the bad things. But what happens is sometimes when you identify a perpetrator or the villain of the story, you inadvertently identify the survivors. And that was a priority for me, is to keep their privacy intact as much as I possibly could. So that was part of that decision, to kind of keep that anonymous. People do their own sleuthing, of course, and the internet exists. So there's only so much that you can do. But I tried my best to sort of to keep those things out of the book.
Yeah. So we'll just say it's an unnamed Division I university in a foothills town near a very specific rock formation.
Right.
And we'll leave it at that.
Right.
We'll let the listeners decide what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Let's set the scene a little bit better for listeners, because this isn't straightforward reporting. It's part memoir. So can you tell us a little bit about how you became part of the investigation and part of the story here?
Sure. So I never really sought out to become a private investigator. It was just a weird thing that happened in a bookstore with a lawyer. I was, browsing the stacks and started talking with this lawyer, and he started just talking a lot about his personal life. And then he was very surprised that he was doing that. And I said, that always happens with me. And that probably always happens with you, Peyton. You have that same face.
Oh, thanks.
Right? You have this, we're on Zoom, so I can see your face. I know people are probably like, I'll tell you everything about me. And I said, that happens a lot. And immediately he saw a way to use that in his, benignly use that in his law practice. And he hired me on the spot as a PI. And but I didn't have any experience as a PI. I didn't know what I was doing. So I really flubbed my way through the first few cases. And then he got this case, this amazing, it was a Title IX sexual assault case on where a group of football players and recruits gang raped a college student. And it was, there had never been a Title IX sexual assault before. This is totally new ground. So he hired me, and it turned out, even though I had kind of failed on the first few cases, this turned out to be a fit for me. And it was something that it was a case in which I sort of learned how to be a PI. And that's kind of how I came to it.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the university system. So you write quite a bit about football culture and the university system sheltering them. And you talk about all these people who at the time were stepping up to defend the football players. What was it like to go up against that in your work?
It was interesting. I'm going to say it was interesting when it was in person because those people are big and they're scary. And they, as one of the witnesses on the case said, their sport is to hit each other. So what are they going to do to me? Right. So, and then you add to that the fact that, a large percentage of them have brain damage because of the sport itself. I mean, it's an incredibly harmful sport. So you're dealing with someone who, under normal circumstances, might be a reasonable person, but they've got mental problems, and because of their brain injuries. And then they're used to getting whatever they want because of their size. So it was like trying to learn another language to get along with someone who has such a different life from your own life, a different set of privileges and disadvantages that you have to quickly adapt to a completely different culture. And I found myself feeling almost sucked into it at times. Like there's this strange, there's a celebrity around them, of course. But also I found myself pretending a lot, pretending to share their value system, pretending to, believe what they believed about women, just so I could get them to say things. It was sometimes scary and sometimes thrilling. It was, I can't really describe it.
I mean, the way you write about it was very intense. I mean, I felt like I was in those interviews with you, and I was like, oh my goodness, what's she gonna do? I can only imagine.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy, champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
So your book, it tells two stories side by side. One is the allegations against the football players. And then two, it's your own story about surviving sexual assault. And you're very candid in the book. And reading that, the two stories, they kind of build on each other. They're very much entwined. Do you think you could have written this book without that personal piece of it?
I wanted to. I tried to. That was what I wanted to do. I really didn't want to talk about myself. I'm a fiction writer I've written 2 books of fiction before this, so it's not like I don't write about myself, But I realized that I was just being a coward, really, because I was writing about these exceptional women who, at physical danger to themselves, at great emotional risk, and it turned out financial risk too to themselves, they were coming forward and they were talking about what happened to them. And so I couldn't do that for myself, but I'm going to write about them. Who would I be to do that, right? So I realized that I really had to show that this was really my story too, in a different way. Or I wouldn't have the integrity to write about the people I was writing about.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I mean, I just have to say, reading the book, coward is the last word that would come to my mind for you. You write so beautifully, and I really did feel like the two storylines were so interconnected in a really tragically beautiful way.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
With that inclusion, what do you hope that readers take away from your personal story?
When you grow up in those kinds of situations and with those kinds of traumas and tragedies, it's really easy to feel like you're the only person in the world who's going through that or who has gone through that. And as you grow older, the world doesn't really contradict that. But I kept thinking, I can't be the only one in the world who's been through this. I really can't. It's statistically impossible. And I kind of hope that maybe somebody else will feel less alone, or they'll feel like, oh, I had a experience that was nothing like that, but I still feel those feelings. I still have the same feelings that you had, And, well, I have a real aversion to reading like the scenes of of abuse, so I didn't write those. I really wanted the book to be safe to read. But I am very interested in coping and how people cope with abuse, how people cope with trauma, how they cope with their past. I think that's really interesting. I think that's something we all have to do, even if what you're coping with are world events like we're dealing with now, right? Or the pandemic. I think we have a greater understanding of all the ways that things can feel or be traumatic to us and have long-term effects, even if it's not, getting knifed in an alley or being sexually assaulted.
It was shocking because that was really only 20 years ago, and those issues and themes are so common in conversation today. But it wasn't the case 20 years ago when the scandal was playing out. So what surprised you about looking back at the story post the Me Too movement?
It's very different now in really good ways. I mean, the same things are happening. Let's face it, like football teams in colleges are geared toward winning, and whatever it takes, right, is often the mentality, especially in certain states. So not a lot has changed in certain practices, but what has changed is the eye on it, the understanding of it. Before this case, there wasn't really the understanding that a school's responsible for what their team does. It was like, well, those are individual criminals. Those are individual people who committed those crimes. And are they really crimes? There's this sort of attitude like, well, is this really what happened? Or can we even believe these women? Or maybe they just want to be with a football player and they get upset afterwards at their own behavior or something like that, was the attitude I kept coming across. But definitely since Me Too, there's been a movement really toward believing women, right? And because it really sucks to come forward. It's not like, I'm going to do this for attention. It's awesome. I'm going to just revel in this wonderful attention that people are going to give me, along with their death threats and their shaming talk. So I think there's just a much better understanding now. So what's ending up happening is on the back end, there's better enforcement of the law. On the back end, people are feeling a little braver to come forward. I believe, I hope, since this case and all the subsequent sexual assault Title IX cases. Because it's no longer this new ground. It's no longer this it's your fault. You shouldn't have been there in the first place kind of idea.
So the case, at the end, no one was charged. No one really got punished. It seemed like nothing really happened except the girls who stepped forward, their lives got turned upside down. So what were you hoping for in writing this book now?
Well, some things did change. Well, a lot of things did change, actually. Law changed, right? The NCAA, they had to change rules. They changed their rules. That university changed their policies, and they actually became a front runner of like Title IX enforcement. That university actually set a lot of standards now because they had to. As part of the settlement, they had to change their policies. So it was very, very important to the plaintiffs that the university change what they do. So they changed what they did, and it improved them vastly. For example, the fact that there are Title IX coordinators at schools, that didn't happen before. So if there is a violation, a student or a faculty member or anyone can go and rectify it, and it's the fact that this is a federal law is backed up in reality now. So it set a precedent for the law. And I know that feel like if you're not a lawyer, you're like, whatever. But really it did enable all those other cases to happen. So, the plaintiffs, their lives were turned upside down, but I have to think that they feel proud of what they accomplished. If I were them, I would feel incredible. I feel like, well, that's a huge contribution I made to women, really, and to society. What I hope the book will do, honestly, is shine a light on this case. This case was amazing. It changed everything in the field of sexual assault. And this case really didn't, lawyers knew about it, but I've seen books since then about Title IX sexual assault that have never mentioned this case ever. So, and I'm like, how could you not even know about this case? This is the case that started everything. And from then, everything changed. So I really wanted people to know about it, and what these people accomplished, what these women did to change life for the rest of us.
What do you think the impact or maybe legacy of this has been locally for Colorado, for that community?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they were, the team and the state, they were in such a spotlight for a long time in a negative way. This case was on ESPN, and it was, in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and it was they were seen as villains, and honestly, that's because of their behavior, the way they reacted to the case. So legacy wise, I do feel like for a while they had a hole to crawl out of. And I do know also that since they changed their recruiting practices, that team, they weren't winning anymore. And they have this, one of the survivors of the football sexual assaults, I think I call her Nina in the book, and they call it the curse of Nina, because they're not, they haven't had those like big wins.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah. So, but again, you have to ask, like, is winning, I think it's changed a little bit of the idea, like winning a game is not and should not be more important than a woman's life. I'm hoping there was a value shift in the community.
Well, Erica Krause, thanks so much for joining me on CityCast Denver.
Oh, thank you. These are such great questions, Peyton. You're such a good interviewer. And I know that your listeners can't see your face, but you have that face. You could be a PI. You could rock it.
I'll think about it if this whole podcasting thing doesn't work out. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, write up a review about it wherever you listen to podcasts and rate us 5 stars. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye!